Now let's go to international affairs then, and well, Trump and Gaza, and well, is this a kleptocracy in action? It certainly begins to look that way. So Benjamin Netanyahu has been in the United States since yesterday, and he remains unarrested. So we can take note of that. Many people were dreading what was likely to be announced once he and Trump met, although that was what was announced in the press conference should have come to no surprise as anybody who was watching Vanessa Bailey's report from last Wednesday's program. What was perhaps a surprise to some was the announcement that the United States would just steal the Gaza Strip. Let's listen to a few seconds of what he had to say.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
So he's very careful there not to say for the Palestinians, it's for the people of the area. So the question is, what is he talking about? He's talking about ownership here. He's just announced perhaps the replacement of the United States Republic with a United States kleptocracy. So this is what he had to say. I also strongly believe that the Gaza Strip, and especially those who live there, and frankly, who's been, now these are his words, who's been really very unlucky. It's been very unlucky. It's been an unlucky place for a long time. He said they're living under fallen concrete that's very dangerous, very precarious. They instead can occupy all of a beautiful area with homes and safety, and they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back to do it again. And I thought, Charles, that was a really spectacular comment, that they can live out their lives. I mean, what is he saying here?
Well, it sounded very final for the people involved in that sentence. That I must say was absolutely the piece that jumped out at me when I was listening to it. It sounds as though they are to be the last generation of Palestinian Gazans. I mean, it's extraordinary.
Yes, not Netanyahu, clearly very happy with all this. This is what he had to say. I mention again our three goals, and the third goal is to make sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. President Trump is taking it to a much higher level. So I suppose the question is, what's going to happen with Jordan and Egypt? Are they going to wear this? And is this action, in fact, completely destabilizing for the region? We'll be talking about much more about this in Extra, but Trump made it very clear that Jordan at least has absolutely no choice.
Egypt's president and the King of Jordan have both said that they won't take in displaced people from Gaza like you suggested. Is there anything you can do to make them do that? I mean, tariffs against those countries, for example?
They will do it. They will do it.
What makes you say that?
They're going to do it. Okay? We do a lot for them, and they're going to do it.
Now, as I say, we will be talking a bit more about this on Extra, but Vanessa, let me welcome you to the programme and get your thoughts on this. No surprise in one sense, but pretty shocking in another.
Well, not really, because, Trump was always expected to come in and, let's say, be the economic hitman. Biden was the bomber in the genocide there, and Trump is going to come in as the economic hitman. So we're heading towards Netanyahu's dystopian vision of Gaza being a free trade zone, Palestinians being in much smaller concentration camps as slave labor, and exploitation of Palestinian gas and reserves in the occupied territories and off the Gazan coast. And of course, the bully boy tactic towards Jordan and Egypt has been going on for many years. They've already been threatened with instability should they refuse to accept Palestinian refugees. There's talk now potentially of Syria making the Palestinians inside Syria Syrian nationals, which of course strips them of their Palestinian nationality and their right to return. So what we're seeing is all part of the plan to finally ethnically cleanse all of the Palestinian territories.
Absolutely. As I say, we'll be talking more about that in extra. But in the meantime, perhaps we've got some parallels between how Trump is beginning to run his regime and the regime that has installed itself in Syria.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Trust the BBC to come out with this extraordinary headline. Ahmed al-Shara, of course, al-Jolani, as we know him, named Syria's transitional president. So, I mean, this basically avoids saying unelected, not chosen by the people. And they go on in their article to, of course, not condemn anything that HTS, a designated terrorist organization, is doing inside Syria. So if we go to the article, we can see what they actually say in it. So they're talking about rebel military commander Hassan Abdul Ghani announced the cancellation of Syria's 2012 constitution and the dissolution of the former regime's parliament, army, and security agencies, according to the Syrian Arab News Agency. So basically, they've just erased Syrian history, made Jolani president, and if and then then there was, in the last 48 hours, there was an interview done by The Economist in Damascus with Jolani. And I have to say, it was one of the more challenging interviews for Jolani. And if we have a look at a couple of the questions that were actually asked, so they talk about wanting to re-establish diplomatic relations with America. But right now, HTS is listed as a terrorist group by the United Nations. So, of course, what is Jolani's response? Therefore, there is an item to dissolve all factions of the Syrian revolution, including HTS. Hence, the classification has become meaningless. So their terrorist activities gets completely erased by the rebranding, or rather the disappearance of HTS from the political scene in Syria. I mean, this is a strong message to all other US, UK, Western terrorist assets that it's very easy to wriggle out of their terrorist prescription in any of these countries. So then they're talking about Israel. Could you imagine normalizing relations with Israel? This is very interesting. Here we come into the kind of Tony Blair wriggle out of answering a question. So he goes into great lengths about, that it's all terribly difficult and complicated. It's all the fault of the former government led by the two President Assads. We entered Damascus only 2 months ago, and there are many priorities in front of us. So clearly a priority was not to prevent Israel further occupying Syrian territory and bombing the Syrian military infrastructure into total obliteration. And he bangs on also with a lot of procedures and laws in order to discuss it. And to be honest, we've not considered it yet. So that says very clearly. And then finally, they mentioned the fact that elections have effectively been delayed for 4 years. And as I said, he's named himself president, having dissolved all of the institutions in Syria that could have been any kind of obstacle to his presidency. No elections. So he then talks about the fact that, well, we have to take Syrians in the diaspora into account. We have to give them time to be registered and to return to the country and so on. Therefore, this process needs time. And I've asked the experts, and I would recommend that replace experts with MI6 and Tony Blair and his entourage. And they said we need at least 3 to 4 years to complete the process. Meanwhile, we're developing the election law, the constitution, and the laws that will regulate the country. We are working on them thoroughly and in consultation with the experts again and the United Nations as well. Hence, when these things are ready, we will have the elections that have integrity. So clearly the current non-elections don't have integrity. And then moving on to, this is from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. And this was from the commentator Ahmed Sharwawi. And if we actually see what he points out, he goes quite strongly against Jolani for the sheer nepotism, because the majority of the Syrian military now is not only HTS, but also foreign mercenaries that were fighting under the banner of HTS. But as he points out, which again could be considered quite comical, but of course it isn't in the context of what's happening in Syria, al-Shara's relatives hold key posts as well. His brother Maher is Minister of Health. Qutaiba Badawi, a relative of his third wife, is head of General Customs Administration. Abdulrahman Salame, brother of his fourth wife, serves as head of the presidential palace. So we have a clear idea where this is heading. And then on X, somebody responded to me saying that this is a brilliant strategy, but he will also have to dissolve himself to avoid, of course, his own terrorist designation by the United States Department. And as I pointed out, well, he has already done that because he's no longer al-Jolani. He's now Ahmed al-Sharaa. So he's clearly managed that one as well. And I just wanted, Piers Robinson, who's a regular contributor to UK Column, sent me this video last night, which is Richard Dearlove, former director of MI6, addressing RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute Defence and Security think tank, back in 2014, talking about the impacts of terrorism. And rather chillingly, he said this.
The second Saudi incident predates 9/11 and comes from a conversation with Prince Bandar, now, I believe at the moment the titular head of the GID in Saudi Arabia. And that was, the time is not far off, Richard, in the Middle East when it will be literally God help the Shia. More than 1 billion Sunnis have simply had enough of them. And that was a chilling comment, which I remember very well indeed.
And bear in mind, of course, that is exactly what is happening right now in Syria with the ethnic cleansing of the minorities, which include Shia, Alawite, and Christian. And as if you didn't think Tony Blair was enough, Mike, you and I were talking about Alistair Campbell in relation to Tony Blair being involved with the new Syrian foreign minister at Davos. But guess what? Alistair Campbell and Rory, I'm not with MI6 Stewart, are currently in Damascus to carry out an interview with Jolani. So not only did they spin a former terrorist, Tony Blair, or I guess he's an ongoing terrorist, but here they are now to basically do the spin for Jolani. So the circle is complete.
It is indeed. Thank you for that, Vanessa. I mean, what are your thoughts, Charles, on these two going over and interviewing Jolani?
Well, I mean, it is the sort of completion of the entire laundering process. I've just noted down subsection 5 of section 1 of the Terrorism Act 2000, which I think should have both Campbell and Stewart subject to an investigation, because the Terrorism Act specifically says that action taken for the purposes of terrorism includes a reference to action taken for the benefit of a prescribed organisation. Well, if what they're doing is not for the benefit of a prescribed organisation, then I really don't know what is.
And we have to remember that Jolani can say, well, this is a moot point because HTS is in the process of being dissolved. It has not been dissolved as yet.
Absolutely.
He has not, he's still the same person, whether he tries to change his name or not. So these two clowns have in fact committed an offence.
They have, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Simple.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Now let's move on. If you like what the UK Column does and you'd like to support us, please go to support.ukcolumn.org. You can make a donation. It's one way to help us out. Another way is to join the UK Column community as a member. There are various membership levels there, depending on whether you want to join monthly, annually, and so on. And that helps us out. It also gives you access to UK Column News Extra. You could pick something up from the UK Column shop, or you could pick something up from clive2carl.com. All of those help us greatly. If you can't support us financially, thank you to everybody that does. Please at least share the material you see on the UK Column website, because we do need that help to get around the censorship regime that we're experiencing. And the share links are on all the various content on the website. Now, date for your diary, another reminder, Saturday the 5th of April 2025 in Cheltenham. UK Column is back on location. We'll be announcing tickets and speakers very, very soon. But please keep that date for your diary. Anything, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's going to be amazing. Be there.
Be there.
That's it. Keep it simple.
Absolutely. Yesterday, the interview that went out was Debbie Evans with Sandy Adams and Roger Meacock talking about farmers, food supplies, and so on, and the bigger agenda. Do have a look at that. It's now posted on the UK Column website. And the interview tomorrow, Charles, is with you and Sir Julian Rose.
It is, which will dovetail well with the previous interview, of course. Julian, known to the UK Column and imbued with as much experience and inspiration as any interviewee. He's going to be talking about the continued assault on food and the food industry, and particularly human health, but also, as I say, inspirational. He always has a way out of it, and he has been there and done that. So he really does know of what he speaks. So definitely tune in tomorrow at 1:00.
Okay, a reminder of the Public Child Protection Wales annual conference happening on the 22nd of February 2025. Range of speakers there, including Rebecca Manning, Dr. Anna Lutfi, Paul Diamond, KC, and a host of others. David Curtin's in there as well. This is an important event. If you can possibly get along to it, if you're in that neck of the woods, please do so and support Kim Isherwood. We have to remember that Kim was one of the most popular speakers at the last UK Column on Location event in October. Her presentation went down very well because she is an activist that's actually doing stuff. So please go and support her and her team if you possibly can. And a reminder that also on the 22nd of February, if you're in Scotland, the Scottish People's COVID-19 Inquiry is taking place at Lauriston Hall in Edinburgh. Dr. Claire Craig, Richard Enos, Diane Rasmussen-McCaddy, others speaking at that. Dr. Liz Evans as well. Get along to that if you possibly can. Okay, Vanessa, let's come back to you then and bring us up to date with what is going on in Lebanon.
Yeah, well, I was very lucky to be able to go to the south of Lebanon and went to several of the towns that unfortunately are written in Arabic on the map supplied. But the areas in red show where Israel has still not withdrawn from. They should have withdrawn, of course, on the 26th of last month. They've now extended that until the 18th, and they're negotiating with the United States effectively to remain in certain points, which I'll come on to. So, as I said, on Monday, I managed to get to some of the towns affected, one of which was Khayyam. This was just one of the photos that I took from there, just to demonstrate the leveling of houses and the destruction left behind by the Zionist occupation. And even though they are not legally still able to be there, they are there. And this next video, which was released by the IOF, shows what they're currently up to. So they're basically detonating houses in the various towns and villages in the countryside where they still are operating. And in fact, even when we were trying to get to Khayyam, we narrowly missed taking a road which would have led us to IOF forces that are still, as I said, in occupation of territory surrounding Khayyam in the south of Lebanon. And just one of the photos showing the destruction and devastation left behind by the Zionist forces, even when they've gone. So this is a town called Aita al-Shab. You can see the before and after pictures, which show very clearly what Israel has done. And then if we look at the next map, which shows the areas that Israel wants to maintain occupation, as you can see, they're all high areas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hills in southern Lebanon. And I've also included there the red dot, which is Mount Hermon on Syrian territory, which Israel occupied since the 8th of December last year, when HTS carried out the multinational coup against the Syrian government. And it's very clear this is what they're negotiating with the United States and President Trump, that they can maintain a presence in these high areas to, in their view, protect the northern settlements in the occupied territories. But of course, it also means that they can surround and surveil the areas. I won't even say occupied by Hezbollah, occupied by the southern Lebanese.
Vanessa, what's Lebanon doing about this? Are they complaining about Israel's continued occupation of these areas, or are they just silent?
No, I mean it's Lebanon is an incredibly complex situation. It is effectively, let's say, controlled and influenced by the United States. You've seen the size of the US embassy. We've shown that in previous reports. More than 5,000 embassy staff operating there, which is crazy. And US influences government policy, even though there is the process of electing a government within or under the presidency of Aoun, who was elected president a few weeks ago. The Lebanese army is responsible for effectively retaking the areas still occupied by the Zionist forces. UNIFIL is there. Both of those entities are effectively pretty much helping the Israelis rather than putting any obstacles in their way, other than, of course, putting reports into the UN, which are only going to disappear into the black hole of US influence. The people of the South have been extremely courageous. In every weekend, they return to their houses, despite the fact that I think more than 36 have been killed by the Zionist forces that tried to prevent them from getting back to their homes. And these are civilians. They're not military in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for that. Now let's move on, Vanessa. And what is the latest on Russia?
Well, Russia, the Middle East. So this is Sergei Lavrov in the last couple of days at the Valdai 14th Middle East conference. Strange statement from him, to be honest. But in part of it, he says attempts to remove Russia, China, and Iran from the process of externally supporting a Syrian settlement are hardly motivated by goodwill. I'm not quite sure why he would expect any goodwill from the West and their allies. And I've slightly paraphrased here. The West's intention is to push its competitors into secondary, less meaningful positions. Well, yes, you don't say Sherlock on that one. I mean, again, a little bit strange wording from him, but I'll put it into context. So on the 25th, Moscow sent Bogdanov, who's the deputy foreign minister, to Syria to meet with, effectively, a terrorist organization whom they were fighting against since 2015. And part of the conversation was the extradition of President Assad, who, of course, was only given humanitarian asylum by Russia, not political asylum. And rather than condemn Israel for the destruction of Syria, it appears that Russia is to be responsible for rebuilding trust with the Syrian people through concrete measures such as reparations, reconstruction, and economic recovery, although I would say the backers of HTS have the largest responsibility for the devastation in Syria, and that includes Israel. Both parties discussed mechanisms of transitional justice aimed at ensuring accountability and securing justice for victims of the Assad regime's brutal war. The Syrian administration reiterated its commitment to engaging with all stakeholders in a principled manner to build a future rooted in justice, dignity, and sovereignty. It stressed that any restoration of relations must address past injustices, respect the will of the Syrian people, and serve their interests. I won't go on and on about the ethnic cleansing that is ongoing and that was not condemned by Lavrov or by Bogdanov during his meeting. And I'll just finish on what was said in the meeting. Russia is considered to have a meaningful role in achieving transitional justice, but that includes, as I said, the extradition of Assad and senior security and military officials in Russia, and to cooperate with tracking down and prosecuting those still at large globally. So effectively, HTS, and of course that means their backers, are pushing Russia now to betray their allies for the last decade, and one could go back, of course, much further than that, back to 1946. Dmitry Peskov, the presidential spokesman, had no comment in response to these claims, which again is slightly worrying. And they're looking for Russian support for the positive, or Russia is supporting positive developments. Again, there is no condemnation of the ethnic cleansing being carried out by a still proscribed terrorist group. So fascinating, but clues are all around us. So this is back from 2021, and recently leaked documents show that Russian firms, basically Ross Electronics, which is a subsidiary of Rostec, which is a state-owned defense conglomerate, have done deals with Saudi Arabia since 2021, going forward into 2026, which includes obviously air defense systems, $2 billion worth. Again, the clues might be in the fact that, of course, in my opinion, looking at the facts as they now have them, there has been a lot of criticism of President Assad's pivot towards the Gulf states. But in my opinion, what we're now seeing is that Russia was very much encouraging Assad to do this, to pivot towards Saudi Arabia. Sometime in 2024, Assad asked the Ansarullah government officials or ambassador to leave Damascus on the basis that Saudi Arabia would provide them with humanitarian aid. That humanitarian aid never came to fruition. And now suddenly we see the HTS Foreign Minister Shaibani, who of course was interviewed by Tony Blair at Davos, welcoming back the Saudi proxy government ambassador to Damascus. So in other words, Saudi Arabia is getting its footprint safely back inside Syria with the help of HTS and potentially Russia. And this again, we talked about the fact that Russia potentially abandoned Syria for a deal with Trump over Ukraine. And in the last 48 hours, this headline came out in Reuters: Saudi Arabia and UAE seen as possible venues for the Trump-Putin summit, where they will discuss Ukraine and future energy cooperation. So very interesting shift in regional balance at the moment.
Thank you, Vanessa. So let's move on to Ukraine then,